This is table 3-1, sinuses, sutures, and fontanelles.
So for sutures, sutures just means where the bones grow together, and it kind of does look like a little stitch, like when you'd get sutured at the doctor. So our coronal suture, corona means crown. Coronal suture is going to separate the frontal bone from the parietal bones, which we'll learn in other videos, but you can see that suture right along there. So here's our view right on the crown, top of the head. Our sagittal suture is going to go right down the middle, and that separates our right and left parietal bones. And then our squamous suture, if we turn this over to the side of the view of the skull, you can see that parietal bone comes down, and then here's our temporal bone. So that squamous suture runs right along there, and that is what separates our temporal from our parietal bone. And then our lambdoid suture, lambda is an upside down Y in Greek lettering, but our lambdoid suture is what separates the parietal bones from the occipital bone. And so here you see that upside down Y, which is our lambdoid suture. Now, sinuses are just spaces. So our sinuses in the skull are first and foremost a frontal sinus, which we would of course find on the frontal bone. So here, this flap, so this one's open, that's open to the frontal sinus. This flap here, if I open that, that opens to the frontal sinus. Our ethmoid sinuses are gonna be pockets up in our, kind of on the inside of our eye. This is usually when you have like what you would term a sinus headache. That's what you're feeling. So you can see an ethmoid sinus here, and then on this side, and then some other views. Probably the best one to see is on our half torso guy right here. But if you look under here, these all the way right here through here are our ethmoid sinuses. And then these two back here, we have one big one and usually one kind of smaller one in front of it. These both are our sphenoidal sinuses. And then to see the sphenoidal sinuses in a different view here, so on a sagittal view, sphenoidal sinuses, we have the two pockets again, so the big one and then a little one right in front of it. And if I take this guy apart here, we can kind of see just the one pocket here, but there is our sphenoidal sinus right there. And then maxillary sinus is going to be what I would call where your rosy cheeks would go. But here's our maxilla. So if I open this flap right here, we can kind of see into that maxillary sinus right there. And then on this coronal view right here, we have two maxillary sinuses right here and here. So if you're looking at a full skull, the maxillary sinus is really hiding just behind here and here. Now our fontanelles are only in reference to a fetal skull. Fontanelles are what you guys would term soft spots when babies are growing. They have these cartilaginous spots that then become calcified and grow into bone. So here we have our anterior fontanelle or frontal fontanelle. And then in the back, at that junction, now this is flawed because it's a plastic model. So you just have to pretend where I'm showing you really is that pink spot like we see here. But in the back here, this is where our posterior fontanelle would be. So kind of where that lambdoid suture meets up. So that's our posterior fontanelle. And then our sphenoidal fontanelle would be right here, kind of where the frontal bone and the parietal bone and the temporal bone come together, right on the side. And then the mastoidal fontanelle or mastoid fontanelle would be back here where parietal, temporal, and occipital bones come together.